Hi everyone. Today I'm here to talk about the rise of China, China's economic model, Western liberal democracy, and the capital-driven world order. I'm Frankie Fu from Shanghai, China. I'm currently a rising senior, and this is one of my first research paper that I've been doing. So this would be the contents that we'll cover today. I'm starting with some introduction and moving on to my argument, and lastly, like a conclusion of everything I've been talking about. So, starting with the introduction, I came up to this topic of the rise of China mainly of two reasons. Firstly, my interest in like international relations and Sino relations, and also economics, because I'm really interested in how like different economic systems, economic models work, and that's something really key and significant in the rise of China. Now, at the same time, my life experiencing the latter part of like China's growth, seeing the past decade with basically the society changing directly in front of me, that kind of made me interested in this rise that is different and rather unique. So that's how I came up to this topic of the rise of China. While this research paper ultimately becomes a like broad examination, the macro perspective on the rise of China from a political and economic aspect, specifically talking about ideas like authoritarian capitalism, liberal international order, and some of the specific things like the Belt and Road Initiative and state-owned enterprises and etc. So, as a brief background, before I start my argument, there are three main things that we have to kind of mention. Firstly, the rise of China is basically how we see that over the past few decades, China has been going through like phenomenal economic development, where we see its economic power and political power standing and rising in their international order. However, this development process is unique and controversial because of one point, because it's a liberal modernization. It's something that we've never seen in the past. It's something that is basically unprecedented because China has never fully embraced capitalism or democracy in this modernization process. And that's what makes this modernization special and different from anything else, or anything that is that we have seen in the past with developed countries. So this makes this rise not only like unique, it also makes it like puts it in opposition to the models of the Western liberal democracies, which could create a lot of problems that I'll be talking about later. Last but not least, we have to know that after the Soviet Union collapses, after the Cold War, the liberal international order is basically what is happening in the world, with the United States playing a single role, a leader, a hegemon that spreads liberalism, that spreads the ideals of liberal democracies, making liberal democracies the stronger powers in that order. Now, the rise of China is one that disturbs it or changes it to a rather new order that I'll be talking about later. So, moving on to my argument, which is basically saying that without betraying its lengthy history, prideful culture, and multifaceted national identity, China demonstrates a strategic model of authoritarian capitalism in this capital-led world order that granted China successful liberal modernization. I'll be splitting this argument into three aspects. Firstly, from the fundamental idea of China's authoritarian capitalism, moving on to the controversies and the dissonance between the Western perception and Chinese intentions surrounding the rise, and last but not least, the strategic growth and how kind of China succeeded with their choices and how those choices brought to the successful modernization process or a successful growth under this capital driven order, and how that is going to be shaping the new order that we're seeing right now. So, starting with the most fundamental idea of China's authoritarian capitalism, the most basic way of understanding it is one model where the country has both a statist political system and but it's still embracing capital elements and embracing the global economy with globalization. It's worth to note that here, as I've been talking about before, the authoritarian aspect or the status political system aspect is what gives this model or give this modernization its significance, its uniqueness. But at the same time, we have to know that most of the growth or most of the rise that China has been seeing in the last few decades is attributed to the capitalist aspect of this model where China is interconnected with global economy with like large capacity of trade and being the factory of the world. So now, however, we have to know that despite the capitalist elements in the markets, like regulations and governmental influence are still prevalent and present in China's market, which means that it's never fully capitalism. Um, this could be shown through the best example of state-owned enterprises, which is marked to be the most important force of the Chinese market, which brings upon the authoritarian aspect of what I call like China, what China calls its own like unique socialist economy. We have to note that there is this trend that those SOEs are undergoing economic transition where they gain more autonomy, but this does not mean that China is embracing full-on capitalist full-on market economy, but instead going through their own goal to a successful socialist economy. So now, one thing that is should be concerned or should be talked about here is why this model works for China, or why China kind of, or what thing in China shapes or made this something real in Chinese society, and that's China's national identity. We have to know that unlike the Soviet Union, China's main source of national identity was not it is not communism. Even though it's a communist country, nationalism plays a bigger or better or greater role. And this means that the major goal from China's national identity is to find self-determination based on nation race, especially the Han nation race, or basically ethnicity. They base themselves on the nationality. They base themselves on this ethnicity, and to research from the history of the century of humiliation and see the country prosper. Basically, in short, China is trying to see that they're originally like prosperous empire. They want this history to research and see those prosperity in the societies. At the same time, China's national identity is like ambivalent in nature, with a lot of seemingly contradictory ideals put into this identity, which makes this identity rather flexible. For example, during the century of humiliation, even though like communists or things like that kind of comes into the national identity, there are still protests and shouts for liberty, freedom, science, democracy, etc. And those ideals are contained together to form China's national identity. And that's where this seemingly contradictory idea of authoritarian capitalism kind of works for Chinese society. Last but not least, um, the traditional roots of Confucianism, mentioning ideals like integrity, mutual trust, and honesty, is also important because that's where Chinese residents are able to see this trust between the government and the resident. They think that the government is working for their interest, and when that happens, authoritarianism can reach a rather stable state that people would see as prosperous or would see as stable. Now, moving on to the controversy surrounding the rise. And as I've talked about before, it's mainly the dissonance, the difference between China's proposed intentions and Western perception. So, taking a few examples, firstly, the Belt and Road Initiative. China's proposed intentions behind this biggest foreign policy of the after the rise of China in the Xi Jinping era, China claims it to be a systemic project for economic development through infrastructure investment, where they put together the interests of like developing countries, especially in Southeast Asia, Africa, and like rather poor countries in Europe. When that happens, they claim that economics impact is way more than political intentions. However, from Western perception, what they see is basically a geopolitical enterprise that is trying to kind of globalize the People's Liberation Army and trying to globalize and spread along the ideas of communism, the ideas of authoritarianism, and that's what the Western liberal democracies are attacking the Belt and Road Initiative on, and that's what they're claiming and actually like scared of from China's place. Basically, they think that geopolitical intention is much more important in this foreign policy than economics. Another example taken is the market regulatory mechanisms that I've been mentioning, the SOEs. From China's proposed intentions, they see this as a way to maintain stability in the market and save companies during instability, because when the government has influence in the market, the economy can actually stable itself when there are the times of instability, because the government can actually just take action and change stuff. Moreover, they think that the governmental influence can subsidize and incentivize innovation, especially in high-tech industries, marked by an example of the Made in 2025 initiative. In general, they're asking for economic development, economic growth, and innovation. However, from Western perception, they see this as an unfair economic advantage in the global market, where China's enterprises are out competing in investments and reshaping developed countries with their own political ideology. Again, they think about politics all the time, and they prove their ideas by raising examples like the Taiwan problem, where they think that this shows China has the intentions to expand politically and haunt the current order that they think is stable. And they think that those are the problems, those are the ideas that would disrupt the stability that or the peace of the world. Regarding general economic rise or economic part of this problem, China thinks, oh, I want economic power. I want to research from history. And from Western perception, overdependence on the trade with China being the factory of the world, being so important in global trade and global economy, they think that this is way too dangerous, or China is getting way too influential on the world order, where again they can start expanding or start doing having a lot of political ideas or political influence in the world. Again, to claim this, none of them is the right answer or the absolute correct answer, because like intentions and perception is rather vague and abstract and relative ideas from the start. This means that sometimes, which is this new aspect or this new section, I'll be starting to look at this without thinking about the intentions or thinking about perceptions, but rather looking at what is happening and finding patterns that would stay, that would change. So now looking at how China's rise is strategic under this capital-driven world order, we have to compare it with the Soviet Union, which kind of failed during the Cold War. So both China and the Soviet Union are communist countries, of course, and they suffered from like ideological opposition with the United States. However, biggest difference between the Soviet Union and China is that while the Soviet Union followed communism and a command economy, China embraced capital, or not exactly capitalism, but at least world capital, global market, and a lot of like they encouraged a lot of bilateral cooperations through foreign policies like the BRI, and they loved a lot of FDI, at least in the like during the 1990s, 2000s, and 2010s. This gives China a lot of strategic advantage compared to the Soviet Union. How? Because this comparison shows how like China is able to use this economic interest of people, where we can easily understand this with China being so interconnected with the global economy. Fighting China or seeing China as a political target or attack is not a wise choice for economic interests. This minimizes the chance of a new Cold War. This minimizes China's chance of being seen as a target, at least in the first few decades of its rise. And this justifies why China is able to see contemporary success while the Soviet Union kind of failed during the Cold War. At the same time, there's another pattern that we see in this newly changing world order, which is that which is that capital is going to play a leading role with three main factors influencing it. Firstly, with China embracing capital again, seeing this a lot of times in this presentation, China's model embraces a capital element, and they love capital. This is what brought them to this rise, and that would stay as a really important role in this order. Now, American capitalism from the old liberal international order is going to be staying and helping with globalization, and that is going to stay as fundamental model of the new order. But last but not least, there is this resurgence of Russia and multipolarism. We likely see a multipolar world order in the future, where we can see that the US, China, and Russia, and perhaps the EU or any other important pole become the most significant poles of this new order. And again, with the global interconnectedness that we see right now, with the globalization that that the United States has been bringing upon in the last few decades, capital is what all of those countries demand, and capital is going to be staying with a leading role because none of the one country is able to be like, oh, I'm the biggest, or playing the most important political role. So now, in conclusion, we see that China's authoritarian capitalism could be seen as threats, could be seen as opportunities, according to different perceptions and intentions. But at the end of the day, despite all the intentions, seeing it from a pattern wise, or seeing it from a rather realistic point of view or practical point of view, it's a strategic and liberal modernization that has been changing and influencing the order, where we see that China is able to use all those strategic choices to meet contemporary successes, and that's where all of those rising power is going to be shaping and changing the world. And that's basically my ideas from this research paper. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frankie, for a very perceptive and balanced analysis of China's changing economic model. Obviously, China is developing in a way to meet the needs of the 21st century, and I suppose we could say that our analysis of China's economic model also needs to move into the 21st century. So thank you for that.